So the final discussion for the day, and it's around industry decarbonisation strategies, technologies, product outputs, and trade patterns. So could we have Matt Handy, CEO of Steamology, to give us a brief introduction first?
Great, yeah, thank you. Great to be here. So Steamology, so we're all about zero emission steam, heat and power. So we take hydrogen and oxygen. If you combust hydrogen and oxygen, or if you oxidize hydrogen in an oxygen environment, you get very hot steam. And unlike a lot of the projects that we've seen, there's no NOx. It's very high temperature, but if you burn hydrogen and oxygen, you just get hot steam. And we have steam generators that can use that for industrial purposes, so 10 bar process steam for food and bev, distillery, laundry. We can take that up to quite high pressures, 46 bar, so 250-degree saturated steam for thermal oil processes, for chemical manufacturing, and we go into superheated 40 bar, 400-degree C steam, and we put that onto an impulse turbine, which makes a very simple, cost-effective, energy-dense engine. In the 200 kilowatt to 1 megawatt range, we're replacing diesel engines in rail freight, passenger rail and marine. So where batteries and fuel cells are starting to struggle is about where we come in. So we're crossing that range of industrial decarbonisation and mobility.
So just thinking in terms of, say, glass manufacturing, which I think is over 1,000 degrees, I believe. Would that be 1,500? Would that be something Steamology can accommodate?
Yeah, not really. So we're playing in the lower sort of medium grade temperature in terms of 250. Our superheated steam can go to very high temperatures, but you probably don't want that. So it's too wet. So that's not the foundation industry is not really a place for us to play.
Anything to add?
Obviously, thinking we sort of look at the full class supply chain, so it may well be useful in, say, some of the filling lines.
Absolutely. We're talking to pasteurising people, we're talking to distilleries, we're talking to breweries. So where you've got really peak demands, we're taking Sunday's wind to make Wednesday's whiskey. We're really good there, and unlike the centralised hydrogen-fired boilers, you haven't got the NOx. Our steam generators are 600 kilos per generator, so a 6-ton boiler is 10, etc. You just scale up. So the steam happens really quickly, you don't have to get early in the morning to light the fire, and you just have what you want, when you want. So we actually, in an industrial situation, can have distributed steam and heat around the plant in the scale that you want, when you want it. And they're modular, so you're servicing the unit down for 2 weeks because you just have them on a continuously. So in the process of brewing distilleries, it's very exciting. We're talking to some of those players. Yeah.
And sorry, it's quick to start up.
It's seconds. So in our engines, we're providing throttle response. So we're providing the throttle response you've got for a big diesel. So it's on and off like that. Yeah.
Rob, obviously Glass Futures seems very advanced, and in your opinion, is there a particular technology or piece of engineering that needs accelerating?
So where do you want to start? I think it is, and this is why sort of we're developing the pilot line and why it's such kind of support we're getting from the industry and from government as well, because it's not just one technology. It is, I think we've seen in the presentations throughout the day, we have to kind of get every bit of the process working as efficiently as possible and decarbonise every little bit to get to that net zero. So this is why we're designing a line. So it's not just furnace technologies we're looking at. We've got waste heat recovery, or the opportunity to bolt on waste heat recovery technologies, abatement, carbon capture, as well as the downstream sort of forming, coating, inspection technologies. And I think it's also important to get them all working together as well. It's no good just having each technology working independently of the other with its own control system. Actually, I mean, certainly, especially in glass, because you melt materials and then you just got to keep going until you get to the final product. So therefore, something that happens in the raw materials, even just having wet material coming in at one end going into the furnace, can cause defects on the bottle and lower efficiency at the other end. So it's really trying to understand how we kind of link it together and control it, which is where the digital technologies come in as well.
Peter, any thoughts?
I was just actually going to ask Rob a question, which, leading on from my point about the availability of infrastructure, would you see all glass plants in the UK eventually kind of using similar fuels and technologies, or do you think that depending on where they are and depending on what they're making, that there might be a range of different approaches?
I think, my sort of opinion is that it will be regional. It will depend upon what energy is available where. It will depend on things like the size of the plant, the type of glass being made. So it's easier to probably convert a factory that makes glass containers to maybe an alternative fuel, or sort of maybe an electric melting, than it is for some of the larger flat glass manufacturers. Those manufacturers in the northwest are going to get preferential access probably sooner than those, say, sort of Leeds, Barnsley, Sheffield area. So again, I think this is why we need to look at the strategy.
Holistically.
Yeah, holistically.
And what does that mean for competitiveness across the sector? Is that, it's probably not your area because you're more R&D, but sort of from a commercial point of view, is that going to cause problems?
It's already causing concerns. So where Glass Future sit, our aim is to do the research to understand the opportunities and the relative costs, and then we're working with government and with the likes of the British Glass Trade Association to then provide that information to government, so that when they're developing their energy strategy in terms of where the investment's going, where the available energy is, how it's being kind of divided up across the different sectors, they can then make sure that they try and make it as fair as possible. So we're in kind of obviously discussion with all the different manufacturers, as are other parties, and it's trying to have that kind of shared understanding of kind of what are the needs, how much energy is needed, what are the carbon emissions across all the different processes, and
And this novel glass manufacturing that you're talking about, Rob, I think you're only talking about new builds. Can this be retrofitted to existing glass manufacturing facilities? And even on the new builds, I was just wondering, accommodating all these different fuels, what happens to the actual hardware? What mods are required on the burners? What sort of ancillary equipment needs, to be factored in?
Yes, I think it depends very much on the fuel. So this is why the liquid biofuels are attractive as a short-term option, because a lot of factories already have liquid fuel backups. So used to run off, like historically the glass industry has run off sort of heavy fuel oil and diesel. They still have backups in case of interruptions to the gas supply. So that's a relatively straightforward transition. Things like hydrogen, in theory, it's relatively straightforward. So NSG Pilkington didn't have to do a huge amount of upgrades to their furnace or their burners to do their hydrogen trials. Admittedly, it was a relatively small percentage overall of fuel, but still, they got it in, and their furnace they just kind of switched it over straight away. They didn't have to turn the furnace off. The furnace didn't lose a lot of temperature. However, what we're seeing from some of the other initial research is things like hydrogen, particularly very high hydrogen percentages. You get very moisture-rich atmosphere.
Yeah.
It affects the glass. You get volatilization more of the soda. You get sodium hydroxide, which basically dissolves the top of the furnace in the refractories. So the current refractories that you get in a current furnace wouldn't last very long if you had a hydrogen-rich atmosphere. So there needs to be more research done into the refractories. So again, this is the reason for having the trial furnace, because if you dissolve it, then you can stop the furnace and rebuild it. You don't have to lose your production facility. In terms of burners, we've been running hydrogen burners. They've kind of worked okay. So I think things like the burner technologies there. I think the abatement could be a challenge.
Yeah.
The higher NOx, higher moisture.
But the technology is there to cope with NOx. Peter, let's just to touch on a little bit on local authorities and the fact that there's this inconsistency, isn't it? Every LA is different. They've got different needs. They've got a different understanding of hydrogen. What's the suggestion there? We're even beginning to see now in tender returns that consultants must be able to organize successful workshops with the different LAs and be able to customize and tailor. And it's difficult. And I personally can't see really how that's going to be done effectively. Any thoughts on what we can do to help our LEs?
Well, as I pointed out, I think many of them are struggling to deliver the statutory services, and certainly even those that are quite progressive, that declare climate emergencies and come out with various kinds of plans, when you go and talk to them about industry, they look a bit blank at you. So they have their own housing stock often, so they have strategies around trying to help decarbonise the housing stock. They have responsibilities around transport, so they know about that. But industry, often is not really in their purview at all. So it's not a very promising starting point. Then when you think about other organisations, so you've got LEPs, local enterprise partnerships, but to be honest, they all want to be the next Silicon Valley. Cleaning up, the industry that's there at the moment is not a very exciting challenge when they all have, they're very keen on low carbon, but it's all about high tech or making graphene or whatever. The sort of dirty business of actually kind of sorting out the industry you've got, protecting employment doesn't seem to be quite as high up their list of priorities as you might expect. So I think there's basically a dearth of kind of local, government or quasi-government organisations which really consistently, are interested in this. And then, the question is, what do you do? Is the answer another layer of bureaucracy, to do this? I think many people would think maybe not. But actually, how can you catalyse these kind of industry and, government and other kind of partnerships, in a consistent way? Because, really interesting what Rob was saying about how the glass industry is now working with ceramics and refractories and all the rest of it. And I just think at a local level as well. I go out and talk to industry, and people on business parks, they say, actually, we never really knew who was next door to us. We've not needed to. But perhaps taking that local collective approach and working with the local authority. So, for instance, in Leeds, I don't know how long ago, 7 or 8 years ago now, they've got this RERF, an incinerator basically, and a district heating scheme that runs off that. So, if you're aware of those kind of plans, then that might shape, the kind of decarbonisation options which are available to you, which you wouldn't necessarily know about. Or maybe there's a nice glass factory next door with some waste heat that it would like to give you.
So it's a bit about the industrial players themselves.
So it's about the industrial players themselves, but it's also about who might convene that, chambers of commerce, whatever it might be, to actually mean that people are in a position to take advantage of these opportunities.
Cool. No more questions from me. Any questions from?
So picking up on that last point. So two things really: the disruption in supply chains that we're going to see. So to us, the iron or steel industry potentially moving away from blast furnaces, and that has a potentially huge impact. I imagine that there's still a global position in terms of the glass industry, although it's more localised. But when we talk about the social impact of that on areas, do you think that will become an additional driving force, or do you think politically it's going to be we'll pick up the pieces after the industries are closed down?
I mean, I think it should be, a big consideration because, representatives that we talked to in the Black Country said, it's not so clear that there's actually a future for industry within the Black Country at the moment. Maybe the companies will close down, maybe they'll relocate to one of the clusters where they can get more ready access to hydrogen or CCS, or maybe if they're internationally owned, they'll just shut down the business in the UK and develop it where it's looking a bit more promising. So I think there's a lot riding on this, and you would hope that at least under the previous government with the levelling up agenda, that there was definitely this intersection. A lot of these industries, as has been mentioned, lie in these relatively deprived areas, and so it would seem to make sense that you would be able to tackle two big political priorities at the same time, decarbonisation and levelling up. But I'm not quite sure where we are on levelling up anymore.
CF Fertilisers is an example, I suppose, of exactly what we're talking about, which is it's like a company closes down site.
And some industries, I think, have the ear of government more than others. Some seem to be strategically important and probably have some lobbying power and friends in Parliament. And I think there are some industries that feel that they are really on the outside and don't have much influence, and are quite worried about what might be happening.
to add to that. I think the solution really is, and I think some of the local authorities have got it, so things like Liverpool City Region, what I've observed, are really progressive in terms of trying to support industry, but not just support industry, but use this whole opportunity to develop green technologies, not just help industry, but to kind of grow new industries. So yeah, they want the kind of Silicon Valley equivalent, but actually industry is a way of providing the kind of drive to do that in the regions, because like new carbon capture technologies, new kind of ways of designing furnaces, like that's kind of new technology, and if develop it here in the UK, it can be sold all around the world. So I think this is the kind of story that industry needs to communicate, and academia needs to communicate to local authorities. It's not just saving the industry, actually use this as an opportunity to invest in all those little startups that you've got around your region, and sort of get industry to buy into them and develop them, and then you can export it all around the world and use that industry then. So for example, some of the glass manufacturers, most of the glass manufacturers in the UK have dozens of plants all around the world. So if a UK SME develops a new inspection technology or a new fuel technology and show that it works in the UK, and that manufacturer thinks, right, this is great, this is going to save us money, straight away they've got 27 or 130 different furnaces around the world as a market. So I think that's the kind of opportunity, and I don't know how many local authorities have spotted that, but I think that opportunity really is there. People are looking to the UK. In fact, actually just last week I was at another conference, and one of the directors from NSG Pilkington said the reason why NSG does a lot of work in the UK is because of the infrastructure, the research excellence, and the government backing that we get in the UK that we just don't get anywhere else in the world. So we have got this unique opportunity, at least for the time being. I think if we keep investing in that, there's a massive opportunity to benefit for the UK and those local regions.
Okay, well, thank you. And that wraps up the day.